Hello and welcome to Detective Comments. This is the themed Batman podcast from the Comic Crush. I am one of your hosts, Paul, and we'll be here in just a second. Sorry, just checking my internet connection there. Helen, hello, how are you?
No, I'm not bad, thanks.
Yeah,
I was just googling. I was just googling when Magic Mike came out, which I'll get to later. Which won't make
okay, like I'm curious.
It makes sense later.
It better. I think that sounds like something we could have hinged the entire podcast on. So, as I said at the beginning, folks, this is the themed Batman podcast from the Comic Crush.
It's a Batman podcast unlike any other.
Indeed. Or, like all of them, I don't know. We don't know. We haven't got time to listen to hundreds of other Batman podcasts. We're too busy making our own. So remember, all our episodes are pre-recorded. We've picked the themes each week. But you guys get to decide which episode goes out. So a lot of these are going out in a completely different order to which we recorded them, because we want you guys to pick which themes you're interested in. And the theme you've picked this week is Not My Batman. Hemon, you had a different title for this.
Yeah, I had a different title because I feel like Not My Batman we could reuse again. My alternative title is Batman's a Dick.
Which should tell you folks that the theme of this week's podcast, this week's episode is Dick Grayson as Batman. So we've picked from the same era. These were done within about a year of each other. We are going to be talking about the first three issues of Grant Morrison's magnificent Batman and Robin, and the 3-issue arc, The Black Mirror, by Scott Snyder and Jock. Of course, Frank Wiley is the artist on Quitely. I always get that wrong. I'm not the only one. I know it.
Oh, is it not? I feel like I write it down quietly.
No. So it's supposed to be a play on Quite Frankly. That's not his real name. His real name is Vin. He is a lovely guy. He is the only artist, one of the only artists that I have lost my shit over. He's an incredibly charismatic guy. I found anyway, and I was really fangirling when I met him because it's just like such a superb artist. And I lost my shit because I met him at Portsmouth Comic Con, the first Portsmouth Comic Con. I'm gonna say all the way back in like 2017.
Okay.
And we really wanted him to come to the shop and exhibit, because at Orbital we had a gallery space where we often showed off artist art and things like that. And he is an artist I would have absolutely fucking killed to have gotten in there. He is an amazing artist. Equally amazing is Jock, who I've also met, an equally fantastic artist for completely different reasons. So both of these are kind of connected. They're both Dick Grayson as Batman. They're both in what would later become the Batman Reborn, or become to be known as the Batman Reborn era. So this is after Batman RIP and Final Crisis. This is... So Batman and Robin is, whilst Bruce Wayne is technically still dead or missing. Yeah, well, hey folks, if you don't know why it's called Batman RIP by now, and then the Black Mirror is when Bruce Wayne is returned. Spoiler. Bruce Wayne is returned, but I think he's off setting up Batman Incorporated. So he's flying all over the world.
It's in the franchise era, which I think is a fascinating sort of thing that Grant Morrison, because they do this in New X-Men as well, where Professor X is kind of setting up X-Corps around the world. It's not that big a thing, but it is happening. And Grant definitely decided there's something in this. What if we set up a Batman in every country. Let's take Crime Fight global.
Do you think? I mean, like, there's the International Club of Heroes arc, which I think is the second arc that Morrison did, in just before the Batman RIP era, or storyline rather, and then, and I know he pulled from a lot of old Batman and Detective Silver Age comics. Do you think, though, that part of his reasoning behind doing this was to do all the things he wanted to do with X-Men, but was constantly kind of not stopped from doing, because he got to do quite a lot with X-Men, but he was given a lot of shit for it from Marvel, and because it's the same writer, same artist. And you've just pointed out, which I didn't realise, he's doing kind of a similar thing.
Well, one of the villains in this first arc has is like a weaponized disease or virus or cold, which again feels like it was. I think it was Sublime in New X-Men. There's very similar weaponized viruses going on. I mean, I feel like they did everything they set out to do with New X-Men, like regardless of whatever was retconned after.
Yeah, I mean, I
think 20 odd years later, it still stands up as absolutely revolutionary comic in my eyes. Like, it's, yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. I imagine DC, they always had more freedom, whereas Marvel always felt like just here for a short period. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there could be something in that. I mean, obviously Marvel gets writers on for long periods. Hickman's on probably one of his longest sustained Marvel periods now, and he's not really doing anything outside of Marvel. And Claremont was there for decades, and I think that's literally all he was doing. He was just X-Men in it hard.
Well, actually, Hickman has got his own sort of enterprise, that sort of Substack, Free Worlds.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Which, three moons, three
moons, 4 worlds. But that's got an absolute cavalcade of like great artists and writers also contributing to it. So I think that probably takes up a lot of time, because he does a lot of things for the subscribers. Basically, it's essentially like comics via Patreon, more or less.
Which is not a bad idea. I mean, I know a lot of.
I mean, I personally subscribed for about the first year. I think I've got like the source book. I found it fascinating, but for someone who traditionally found it a struggle to wait a month for a comic for the next issue, because I would traditionally read his trades, as fascinating as it was, I found it too slow motion, because you're literally watching the behind the scenes, which is fascinating from a craft point of view. But I just wanted the sci-fi comics. So I feel like now, 5 years into that project, I reckon if I did go back and subscribe again now, it's probably got what I'm after, which is, because I think you've got like Al Ewing and Simon Spurrier, and there's probably hundreds of other people who've contributed to it since, all adding stuff to it.
Was it an expensive thing to subscribe to? I don't often look at the subscription.
I can't remember. I mean, there must have been a reason that I stopped. I think it's as expensive as you want it to be. I think there's some real super fan. I think there were some real super fan levels you could go to. I didn't hit that level.
Yeah, no, but fair enough. I mean, comics are an expensive medium.
I don't think I would. I'm sure it was reasonable. I don't think I would have signed up if it didn't offer sort of some value.
Right. Okay. Because I mean, comics are what puts me off is just not having the money, really. Because otherwise, if I had the cash, I'd just be throwing it around at different creators rather than just buying comics, which is an expensive medium as it is. But yeah, I mean, Morrison was at DC for most of his career was at DC. And I still think his biggest sort of work and best work has probably been done at DC, and mostly with Quietly. And this I think is an amalgamation of the more experimental panel work that Quietly was doing in things like We 3.
Yeah.
And Morrison's kind of love of Silver Age comics. Because it really embraces the Silver Age. Like it really does. And I like there's not really, there wasn't really anything going on in comics as far as I knew at the time. Maybe I wasn't reading enough that looked like this. Again, folks, I'm going to remind you, we will be showing images over the course of the podcast. If you want to get a better look at those, just hit the little full screen button down on the right there if you're watching a video. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple, you can just look. There'll be a slideshow of these images on the website. So whilst you're listening, you can just scroll through if you want. But this use of the vertical format of comics, like I hadn't seen anything done like that in a long time. Like he quietly really knows how to use the verticals of a comic. Whereas a lot of people would be concentrating on the widescreen spreads and things like that. Whilst the images within the panels are widescreen, I think he's using the kind of straight up and down nature of it. And it's meant to be read that way, top to bottom. There's no sort of clever trickery. But the beautiful thing is here, like they're entering a tunnel and in this car chase at the beginning, and that's the arch of the tunnel, and that forms like a promethium from which the rest of the art kind of spills out. And also you can get a sense of the camera move. If you're watching a movie, that camera will be flying towards that car as it comes at you in the tunnel, and you would go right into these faces and then come out and go around the car all the way back up into that bottom shot there. So it is cinematic, and yet it's not, because cinema, movies are widescreen, but this is vertical. I think it's absolutely masterful.
I love the shadow of, well, it looks like it's just a bat, and then there's a page reveal of what actually is chasing them.
Yeah. I mean, the new Batmobile, which we can kind of see at the bottom one there, and there is the flying Batmobile that was kind of rumoured and hinted at during RIP and Batman and Son, which is kind of finally working. And this is what I mean. It's completely embraced the daffy kind of mad nature of the Silver Age. When I worked at Allball, we used to have this section. So sometimes the dividers that divided up the comic sections would have little in-jokes on them. So it'd be things like secret oranges instead of secret origins. And when you went to the Walking Dead section, the divider label would say The Walking Dead, it never ends. Because at that point, Walking Dead was like 120 issues in, and there was no end in sight.
I've got to say, like how they pulled off it actually ending with no one noticing. With no one knowing.
Genius move.
Absolute genius. And I think it's one of the greatest achievements in comics. Considering how solicitations work, etc.
Yeah.
If you don't know, it's definitely worth looking into. It's just absolute chef's kiss.
But we had a special section just called Bonkers DC Silver Age. Because that was what it is. And I think the Morrisons. So you know his whole thing with Batman is like, the idea was, what if everything you've ever read in a Batman comic, no matter when you read it, whether it was done in the 60s or done in the 40s or done in the 90s, what if every single thing was all part of one man's crazy life?
What would that do to a man?
Yeah, that was it. That's literally it. And then you get into on a wider level. You read comics in a kind of stasis, right? So we could read this comic from 2009, and then we could read a comic from 2007, and then we could be reading a comic from 1984, and then we could be reading a comic from 1997. But they're all existing for us in that moment in time. We're not necessarily, although people are obsessed with reading orders, including me. I'm becoming less obsessed with it as I get older. I haven't got time for that shit. But we're reading those comics in a stasis, and we're like Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen, where he's like everything that's ever happened is happening at the same time, and that's how time really works. But it's your perception of it that's different. And in fact, that is how time really works: is everything is happening all at once. And that's what comics are. There are a bunch of things happening all at once. And this thing happening to the X-Men over here is happening maybe at the same time as this thing happening to Superman, or Superman coming to Earth. And our minds, the only way we tell the difference really are, of course, the style of art and the style of writing and things like that. But ultimately, they could all be fucking happening at the same time. And that's, I think, Morrison saying, okay, all the events happening to Batman have happened is kind of a comment on comics itself.
Yeah.
And it's saying, don't disregard anything.
Yes.
Bring it all in, suck it all in, and just have fun with it. And there's that great comment that everyone brings up when people start talking about realism in comics and all that kind of stuff, where it's like, who pumps up the tires on the Batmobile? Nobody pumps up the tires on the Batmobile. Who gives a shit? It's not real. And that's the thing. And
it's terrible. Like my mind went to like a rational answer of
but that's it. And my mind would too. But and as much as I actually quite like Batman to be quite gritty and real, and especially in movies. If I'm watching a Batman movie, I'm like, no, like the Nolan stuff is it. Like, that's fucking Batman. But of course, now I've reached a point in life where I'd be equally happy if it was bonkers.
Yeah, because I mean, you were saying there was nothing else like this at the time. I remember.
I don't think there was.
I was reading this in collected editions. I was absolutely not reading comic month to month. And I remember reading this particular issue at the time, and I think I must have finished it because I was enjoying it so much. But I then just got up and then just knocked on the door of my flatmate at the time, and was like, "Yeah, I know you got your girlfriend around, but this Batman book." This is important. And I think it's remarkable that, after however long it was it 18 months, 2 years of Grant Morrison deconstructing Batman with Batman and Son, Black Glove, R.I.P., Final Crisis, it then sort of morphs into this stage of almost putting what Batman is back together again and having fun with it. Because I guess apart from Damien, I can't remember, did Grant create many characters in the first sort of stage of that run? Because this one, it feels like it's having fun with like all the Carney creations, etc. Whereas before, it felt like almost like a greatest hits, like you say. It's like that line in The Force Awakens, like, it's all real, all of it. Even Batmite, even making Batmite logical, and of course, yeah.
Well, and the Batman of 0R, which I think was a genius thing to kind of recontextualize.
Yeah.
He does create characters in that run. Jezebel Jet was probably the most notable one for me. and there were a few others. The rest are all taken from Batman history. And of course, even Damian, really, you can kind of say Damian may or may not have been created by Mike W. Barr for the Son of the Demon graphic novel. Because at the end of the Son of the Demon graphic novel, Talia al Ghul does have a baby, and that baby is sort of whisked away and given to an orphanage. But I think it is kind of regarded as the soft first appearance of Damian Wayne, although it's technically not, because I think he kind of disregards those graphic novels and reconstructs Damian as a kind of, a newer creation. It's interesting because when Damian Wayne first showed up, I remember Liz, because both Liz and I are both hardcore Batman fans. Liz fucking hated him. Like, she hated him. She was like, I can't stand this character. I can't. But now she absolutely loves him. But I think it took her a while to come round to him. Whereas I kind of liked him from the beginning. I mean, he is a complete prick.
I mean, do you think that, like, I always had this sort of snobby attitude of not really liking Robin or a wider Bat family. I always wanted my Batman to be solo. And then over the years, I've kind of softened and been like, why am I being so purist? Like, why am I against him having, like, the sidekick, etc.? There's great stories with them. Because I feel like this was such a breath of fresh air, because he's such a... I think Dick in this book, he's like confiding to Alfred, and he says, like, the arrogance, Alfred, the arrogance of this kid. He's 10 years old, but he's got, like, the self-confidence of a supervillain. Like, if I don't keep him on the straight and narrow, he's going to be, like, the biggest enemy we've ever faced, kind of thing. It's absolutely brilliant.
I really like Damian, and I completely get the thing of not liking Robins. I was always kind of, I want Batman to be like a loner. But actually, I'm kind of, I can take or leave either version now. And right up to that thing of, who's going to become Batman. I think he always wanted it to be Dick. And we were talking about this. There's the whole kind of Battle of the Cow, which you weren't, I don't think you were very...
So this goes back to how I would read comics at the time, which was by trades. And I was just reading Batman by Grant Morrison. So I would just type things into the search engine. Batman, Grant Morrison. Oh, that's the next one. I had no idea that there was any kind of battle for a cow happening in the preceding month. I just assumed, of course, Dick Grayson was the logical choice to take over as Batman. But there was a disagreement in this? Like, there was other people wanted to be Batman?
Yeah, so it was more about who was going to kind of take over Gotham, really, than an actual battle for the cow, because there were no other serious contenders for Batman, I think, personally. And the only one you could look at as a serious contender really is Tim Drake, because the idea is, I think even Bruce recognizes that Tim Drake is Batman but better, because he's, up to a point, he was Batman without the tragedy. So he was a master detective, a very skilled kind of crime fighter and combat expert. But he didn't, up to a point, he didn't have the tragedy. But then I think eventually they killed off his mother and then later on his dad, which is really annoying. It's just like, it does smack of, we don't know what to do with this character, really, so we'll just give him a bit of a tragedy. But even in that, I think he's a healthier Batman. And I think Dick is a healthier Batman as well.
Yeah, which raises a good point. Like, So I'm aware of the adventures of Dick now. If I want to read them, I would pick up Nightwing. What does Tim do? Where does he hang out? I don't think I've come across Batgirl more recently in the last few years.
So I mean, I've got to try and reach into my memories. Tim was Robin for a while, but then becomes, at the end of R.I.P., he becomes a character called Red Robin.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
And I think he then goes off and sort of becomes a protege of Ra's al Ghul. But I'm not sure if that's stuck. He comes back to Gotham. He stays as Robin, as far as I know. Eventually he keeps getting his own book, and then that book keeps getting cancelled. Like Megan Fitzpatrick did a fairly good Robin book recently, but also during that, I think or just before that, he kind of comes out as bisexual. Right. And I think a lot of readers didn't like that, but I it's neither here nor there for me. I think that sort of character growth is interesting. Yeah. I think Devin Grayson wanted to make Dick Grayson bisexual, and in fact did in a sort of spin-off novel, and that kind of got her into a bit of trouble with DC. Like they really weren't happy with it, even though it kind of makes sense because he's very much Lothario, and it does kind of make sense for him to.
His bum is very much like the focus.
Yeah, and the arse is the focus. Yeah. Always. I think the interesting thing out of Morrison's Batman and Robin, one of the fun things for me is the fact that you get, and someone had to point this out to me because I didn't initially get it in the original reading because I'm a fucking idiot. But they went, no, look, it's the fun, cool Batman and the super serious Robin instead of the super serious Batman and the fun, cool Robin. And it's just like, oh yeah, okay. And that is what makes it tick.
Yeah. I mean, let's be fair. Like Damian is over the top, obnoxious in this, and I guess over the the preceding arcs, you learn to love him a bit more, and their relationship grows. But here, you've got a 10-year-old who believes he should be Batman, and he's the rebel maverick cop. But by God, he gets revolt. He just doesn't want to listen to Dick Grayson. It's like, no, you've got to earn my respect. It's like, wow.
Yeah. And there's a great moment later on where he says, so we agreed we're going to call it Robin and Batman. And it's just like, yeah, that'll catch on. Like, we're not good. It's not that. It's not going to be that. And I do like the fact that, as you mentioned, that Grayson, he has serious doubts. And also he goes back to a thing that comes out of the 70s Batman, where there's one point where Batman seals up the Batcave and moves into a penthouse in like the Wayne Industries building. And this is very much part of this run. And it's interesting because it's because Dick feels like the manor is a mausoleum, and it's become,
he's got imposter syndrome, hasn't he?
Yeah. And
it doesn't feel like, I think in both this and Black Mirror, there's that overriding, I'm not sure I'm big enough for these shoes, despite, on the contrary, he clearly is. Yeah.
And also, like, it's great. I loved in Batman and Robin, Alfred's answer is, you keep treating this as a, what does he call it? A shroud. Yeah. And he said, instead, treat it as a performance. And it's just like, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful kind of way of looking at it.
Yeah, it's like a talk about the cape, isn't it? Yeah. It is.
It's just so smart. And that is and also that speaks to the kind of whole dual identity thing that superheroes have, and I think it's an incredibly fun and interesting way to talk about it.
Yeah,
and I love how. Sorry, go on.
Oh yeah, because I was going to say it's like with there's references with Gordon, isn't there? Like with the other cops, they meet them on the roof, and it's like, is his voice different? Is he not as tall as he was? There's things like that, and it's like, yeah, there's something similar about his voice though. I'm just going to allow it. I'm just going to allow there to be a different Batman because, by God, we need the help.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. But he's got an inkling of this isn't his Batman.
But and I think that Gordon actually kind of always knows which one is under the suit, and of course there's the long running thing. Does Gordon actually know? Which is hinted at quite a bit.
You'd hope so, because otherwise, what good a cop is he?
Yeah, and I think there's even been a point or two where Bruce Wayne has said, like, Gordon is far too good a detective not to know who I am. I love this as well, like the paracapes, as they're called, like this whole, and again the structure of the shots. Why
also how the panels are laid almost laid on top of each other, almost like photographs or something. It's gorgeous use of
genius work. And you get to this stuff inside the police, and you see this sort of fragmented paneling, and the way he's carrying the action through is just stunning. And this very much reminds me of what he was doing in We3. But it's interesting because I could have done with 2 or 3 years of Dick as Batman and been really happy. And I actually think it was to their discredit that they brought Bruce Wayne back as fast as they did. I mean, I think Morrison said that I can't remember which writer he spoke to. I've got a feeling it was Scott Snyder, who told him, you've got to give Batman a birth and a death.
Yeah.
And I think he did that, but he just did it in completely different order, because this, Batman Reborn is right. That's exactly what he does with this run. And there's some other fascinating stuff in it for me, which is just how grotesque it all is. Like,
I think I know what you're going to say. It's it's Professor Pig, isn't it? And the Voltrons are just. And I think I was asking about. I remember the first time I read this, I presumed this was another 1950s, 60s deep cut that Morrison had pulled out of the depths. Yeah. No, these are all twisted creations of his, which I love. Like the whole European carny thing, again, is sort of feeding into Dick's background of being a circus kid. It's just a small little, just a reminder of, he was Robin, etc. But Professor Pig, it's the stuff of nightmares. I think there is a line where Robin is tied to a chair and he just says, "You've just redefined wrong."
It's great. It's funny if I read that today. So I just finished this run today, and it's just hilarious.
Yeah,
I think I laughed out loud at that. It's just
and that's why I was Googling when Magic Mike came out, because this actually precedes Magic Mike. So I was wondering, where have you got this idea of essentially Professor Pig has tied Robin to a chair, and he's got like a drill in one hand, a circular saw in the other. He rips his shirt open, and he's essentially dancing like a Chippendale. It is just absolutely. It's the stuff of nightmares. It's just absolute like. What?
Oh my God! It's just. I was wondering how that was going to pay off, Evan, and I don't think I could have asked for anything better there, really.
Like, basically, I was visualizing it with like rain or something. Like he's putting on a performance. I don't understand. I don't understand why. He's just wrong. And I know he appears again a little bit in Batman and Robin, but I think it's an absolute tragedy that he's just not really used. I remember one issue. I think Tom King uses him fantastically in his run.
He's in the Nightmares arc.
Yeah, I think it's like in an abattoir or something. It's just absolutely grim. But I don't think anyone's really, other than that, really utilised him that much since, which is a shame because it's just such a bizarre villain. And I think it's really tough to create new Batman villains. But Professor Pig, 15 years later, sticks with me. I was absolutely shocked. I was playing a Batman video game. I think it was Arkham Knight. Professor Pig turns up in that game, and I was absolutely shocked. Like, wow, this is a deep cut.
I think that he is kind of one of those indelible characters because it's not often you get them in the modern age. I think every writer tries to create characters, partly because I do think they get a little bit of a financial kickback if those characters are then used in other media, which is right, more than right, in fact. So I think there's something in that. I mean, Tinian's run, fairly recent run, he was just creating new characters every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I didn't find them as. I think they didn't really stick for me the way a lot of these characters did.
I feel like I need to reread Tinian's runs on Batman because he is definitely, of his independent stuff, he is by far one of my favourite writers at the moment. The whole Something's Killing the Children and Defiantly Proof, and I think there was something with the internet. I can't remember what that was called.
World Tree and
that's the one.
Nice House on the Lake was particularly
that is incredible as well. So like he feels like one of the hardest working people in comics at the moment, just churning out real high quality. And I feel like his Batman didn't satisfy me, but I was reading that month to month, and I feel like sometimes if you go back and read them together in a format, it might work a bit better. Because like I say, he's one of my favourites. But that was one of the things. He was throwing a lot of new characters at the wall. And I think there's sometimes something in you that's like, no, I don't want to see him, I want to see Riddler. Which like I'll be reading Spider-Man and I'll be like, oh, who's this? I don't care, give me Dr. Octopus. Like there's thousands of Dr. Octopus stories, for God's sake. But there's like that weird thing in you. Whereas, I don't know, there was something about Professor Pig that Grant Morrison pressed all my buttons, and I just assumed that Professor Pig had always existed and had been a long-running Batman character because it's just so well. It's so well formed. Like the whole thing with like he's taking little children and putting horrific doll masks on.
Oh God, it's horrible.
Into his little henchman army of. And I think if you try and take the mask off, your face comes off with it. It's just nightmare fuel. But it's all presented in Frank Quitely's almost pop art. This.
Well, as you're saying, I mean, look at the colours here, and that is beautifully pop. And I just find it. Oh, sorry, we've gone too far there. I just find it absolutely gorgeous. Speaking of Quitely again, like. Stuff like this is just that is beautiful. That tells you everything you need to know about what's going on there. Like just in the body language is just amazing. I love Alfred in the little penny as well. That's fantastic. But like, I really like the characters in this. It is very much. Again, how you can make the X-Men connections is that some of these guys are almost mutants. Like Toad is, what the fuck is Toad?
Yeah.
Like, what is he? I mean, I know we've had the animal-based characters before. There's Killer Croc.
I love that he doesn't really bother to try and explain deep backstories. It's just accept it. Just accept there's a guy in a pig mask that's doing Chippendales meet Silence of the Lambs, and just accept it and just go with, because it moves along at such a pace. Mainly, like it sparse dialogue and just letting Frank do his thing. It's just absolutely great fun. And it made me think, do you know what? I need to read the other 13 issues again soon, because I had a whale of a time with this. And then I started thinking, should I go and read all the Morrison before that?
Well, I read it in. I got the, although the dust jacket is just over there somewhere, but the Batman by Morrison Omni, where it's reordered.
Okay.
So Batman and Robin 1 to 3 opens it, and then it starts to break out into the Return of Bruce Wayne and stuff like that.
Oh, that's interesting.
But that tells you how quickly they started bringing him back.
Yes.
Because then there was Bruce Wayne, The Road Home, and all of that. But there's good stuff in this, and I think it's also got the missing chapters of Final Crisis in here, or missing chapters of Batman R.I.P.
R.I.P. Yeah.
I mean, Final Crisis. God. So the idea was the Batman R.I.P. interlaced with Final Crisis, and they're best kind of read sort of together, especially the last issue. When I worked at Orbital, and we used to get very young, like teenage 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids coming in who were like, we thought might be new to comics, and they wanted Final Crisis. We would ask them, not in a patronizing way, how familiar with DC Comics are you? And if the answer was, I'm not, this is my first comic, or I've only read a couple of things, we'd be like, no. Like, please don't do this to yourself, young man. Put it back. It will still be there in 6 months when you've read a bit more. Because, I mean, I've been reading DC Comics for years. I had no idea what was going on.
And that's why my counter-argument is, while I understand you're trying to protect young, impressionable minds from reading DC Comics on hard mode, because you're literally you're in Grant Morrison's world now.
Yeah.
And I don't think even other writers who were trying to write tie-ins had any idea what was going on in Final Crisis. Grant just created the ultimate crossover, except the crossover was only in his 10 issues that he wrote.
Yeah.
I think it's incredible. And I would say, I think I read it early on in my DC adventures, just because I was enjoying Batman. I had always been more of a Marvel kid, so I was absolutely lost when suddenly Darkseid is. What's Granny Goodness? What is all of this? I didn't know who the Preston was. I didn't know. There was so much I didn't know. But what I got out of it was I moved past. I don't know what that is. I just enjoyed the story, because it is a bombastic story. At the end of the day, it's like, the world, the universe is ending, and these characters are gonna have to bet. Like, there's a moment where I think how Jordan is given his lantern ring and told, you've got 48 hours to save reality or something. Like, not many people other than Grant Morrison will write such a ridiculous statement, and it just feel like the most metal thing alive. Like, you could have punched the air at that, going, yeah, come on. And I think from that nucleus of 10 issues of, I don't understand what I've read, but I really dig that, I suddenly start looking at, okay, I think I went backwards and read the Justice League with Grant Morrison. That has a bit more apocalypse in. I go back further, I learn about Jack Kirby's New Gods and Fourth World and things like that. I discover the Question. I think I read 52, and like, I feel like it's a gateway to everything in the DC universe, even though you probably, I think if I go back and read that now, I'll enjoy it and I'll understand more each time, but I guarantee there'll at least be 30% of it like, I need the cliff notes. I don't understand I don't understand who or what is this panel. But I love that it feels like this puzzle box of, it's an open world into learning more about DC.
This is why I think Crisis on Infinite Earths was great, because that was just a who's who of the DC universe at that time. And even if their character just popped up for one panel, it's just like, oh yeah, okay, that's Cave Carson, that's such and such. Whereas I don't think Final Crisis works like that for new readers. I do want to go back and reread it at some point in tandem with RIP, but I don't know when I'm going to do it, because there's loads of Final Crisis that I haven't read as well. Like there's loads.
I've never read any of the tie-ins actually. I've only ever read the Grant Morrison Final Crisis.
Yeah, apparently they're supposed to be great. Like a lot of people really laud the Legion of Three Worlds.
Okay.
That comes out of that. And the one I've never read, the event that I've never read, because I'm not really in a big events guy, to be honest with you, but is Infinite Crisis, which I'm dying to kind of read. But again, I don't know, because that's a very Batman centric. I think it's actually Batman that kicks that crisis off. By mistake, of course, because he's Batman, doesn't fuck up usually.
But I mean, Final Crisis. I mean, spoilers for the 15-year-old comic, but essentially, after having a whole arc and book named Batman R.I.P., Batman doesn't actually die in that. His end kind of comes in at the end of Final Crisis, where he.
Well, they give him, as I recall, a fake death in R.I.P.
Yeah, which is then kind of revealed in those missing chapters, like a year later. But it has the line of Batman walks out to confront Darkseid. Is it Darkseid?
I think it's supposed to be Darkseid. I always prefer Darkseid.
Okay.
But I believe it's supposed to be Darkseid.
Yeah, he declares, that he famously doesn't use guns, but for you, I'll make them the exception. Yeah. And usually, again, I think I'd hate something like that. But after all the stakes, you kind of understand the desperation that Batman's going through, using his special laser gun. Obviously, it backfires, and
the Omega Beam,
and he gets sent back. What was it? He gets sent back in time.
It gets sent back in time. Yeah. The actual, I'll tell you, a really good Fourth World comic to read that features the New Gods and Batman and Superman and the Justice League, or some of them anyway, is Cosmic Odyssey, which is an absolute masterpiece, and was my introduction to Mike Mignola. And when I first looked at Mignola's art on, it's like, Batman's not supposed to be drawn like this. What is this? And then years later, of course, I read Hellboy, and it was just like, oh, now I get it, and went back, and now I love it. And it actually is one of my all-time favorite books. And that is,
what was that called? I'm actually going to.
It's called Cosmic Odyssey. So it's a 4-issue prestige format series. I forget when it was done. Sometime in the late 80s, early 90s, I would say. I've got a feeling it's about 1988, 89. And it's Darkseid and the anti-life equation, and it's kind of the anti-life equation getting loose across the galaxy, and they have to send a bunch of superheroes from Earth to get it back. And it's kind of like an alliance between New Genesis and Apocalypse. But absolutely masterful, and still one of my favorite comics of all time. But yeah, I mean, on the other hand, we've got Black Mirror, which is set about a year after. I mean, are you ready? Do you want to talk about Black Mirror?
Yeah. I think. I think I'm trying to think. In regards to Batman Reborn, I'm still getting over the shock of Professor Pig. To be fair, I think. I think it just does a remarkable job of. It's just a great comic. It just brings a smile to my face just thinking about it, and I think it's fascinating.
The Batman and Robin.
Yeah, Batman. And I think it's fascinating that we go from there to Black Mirror, which I believe was probably Detective Comics. It's like the last 10 issues before New 52 starts. So this is the first 3 issues of that. And just the shift in tone. Yeah.
I think Snyder was coming in here. He teams up with Jock, who is another terrific artist, just completely different style. A bit Phil Hester, but I quite like his kind of very jagged, angular style. He's a lovely guy, actually, Jock. He's a British artist. I met him when he came to do a signing for Batman One Dark Knight, which was his 3-issue Black Label miniseries, which is terrific and a great. It's kind of almost like Escape from New York with Batman.
Yes, I have.
That is good. That was a good series, and he very kindly signed my Black Mirror and my One Dark Knight and some other stuff for me. He's a lovely guy. So this is much more of a traditional Batman story in that it starts with a crime, even though that crime is kind of based in the monstrous corner of the Batman universe, involving a child mutating really into a sort of form of Killer Croc and attacking some bullies at his school, and then that leads Dick to discover that a whole bunch of basically, it looks like evidence from the Gotham PD has been stolen, and sort of farmed out to the black market, and all this supervillain stuff. And that, to me, is a much more straightforward, traditional Batman story.
Yeah, he's just chasing down leads and bodies and gradually getting towards the culprit.
It's a detective. It is literally, and that it was extremely smart that Snyder took it back and just was like, yeah, Detective Comics, which for a while in the sort of 80s and 90s, Detective Comics was, before they got into the big crossover event era of Batman, where Batman kind of became like, I think they started almost treating Batman the way that Marvel treats X-Men, which is like, oh, this is entirely its own universe, and some of these other characters from the universe might come in, but we're going to do big sweeping events. And it's like, those events were incredibly ambitious and they were good. However, what you lost were the detective stories. And this is Grayson in the Penthouse era. He's moved back into the Wayne Penthouse, and they're helping the Gotham PD. So this is after Bruce has sort of outed. He's done that whole thing where he's announced that the Wayne Industries has been helping the Batman for years. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And you know they've donated this huge crime lab to the Gotham PD. Again, it's not a major story, but it does throw up some really interesting, fascinating ideas. There's this weird motif with the animals, which I don't quite get. I'm not sure what they were trying to do there. Like the thing with the vultures. Later on, there's a like this sort of weird peacocking bird that appears in the corner of a panel. I didn't really get that. I don't know if you did.
I don't know if I got it, but my interpretation, and that might be coloured.
Sorry, you're
no. Hello?
Sorry about that, folks. Problems there.
Got a
Technical problem. Your multiple chiefs. Don't know what's happening there. There you go. Let's get into that. There we go. So we're back on the motif with the birds.
Right. Yeah.
Now that's gone. Bloody hell.
No, I'll go through what I thought the vultures were.
Right.
And it might be coloured by having read this and the last book back to back, but it almost felt like in Batman Reborn, Dick had a bit of imposter syndrome, and I felt like that was still hanging over him a little bit. Like, you know, even with the interactions with Gordon, there's things like, "Come on, you don't need to be so formal. You know, you took me to prom," and he's like, "I took my daughter to prom. You were just in the car." And there's, you know, that kind of falls flat. Like he's trying to, and I feel like it's more, you know, he's still Batman. And it was one thing being Batman while Bruce was gone, but now Bruce is back, and he might be franchising all over the world, but the actual Batman is back, and yet he's been left to Gotham. And I felt like the Vultures are almost a signifier of he knows he's not good enough, and the Vultures are circling, because I guess he goes to quite a desperate place in this book, despite his enemies very much just being people. There is no supernatural element per se. He is just up against people, and I think he's got self-doubt, and there's the way he's drawn, he definitely seems he's trying to prove something to himself. He does seem quite angry in this book, though. You know, things are being stolen. People are up to no good in his city.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about it like that. Because I can't remember how long it is after Bruce comes back finally, and they sort of that Dick moves on to his own book. I think Nightwing was one of the first new 52 titles that came out, virtually alongside Batman and Action Comics and all those kind of the heavy hitters that you'd expect. I don't really know. I mean, this is kind of a fascinating look at the sort of Gotham underworld, and I think it's quite organic in the way that it's a crime that springs up that's unique to a world that has superheroes and supervillains in it.
It feels like a Gotham Central plot point. I don't know if it was covered. I think maybe people were stealing weapons and stuff.
That is so. Funny enough, in this scene, I believe it is, they talk about Jim Corrigan, who was the cop who was famously in Gotham Central making a nice sort of pay packet, selling off evidence from the Gotham PD.
I had completely forgotten that, and now you said it, I'm like, yes, of course.
And he does mention Corrigan in this. So that is a good, interesting point for you to bring up, because he definitely I imagine that was very much at the forefront of their minds.
But yeah, definitely that real grit. It's like, if Gotham was real? Here's a real gritty interpretation of the fantastical.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, one thing I do want to mention here is this is one of the things that Jock is excellent at, which is this placement of panels against a larger double-page spread panel. And look how much real estate he gets through. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 panels across 2 pages. and a ton of dialogue. You know, that is fantastic kind of craft there.
Yeah, it's insane creativity. It's like literally having both cake and eating it, in that I want to have a double page spread, but I also need the script demands that I fit in a conversation between Gordon and Dick. And he's done both, and it's wonderful.
And interestingly enough, it kind of highlights that as much as Quietly really uses the vertical axis of comics, Jock knows how to use the horizontal one. And I'm sure they're both good at equally kind of using both. You know, you saw with Quietly's experimental paneling earlier, but there's great stuff. I love this moment as well. And again, it just marks out the way that he's different. You know, Bruce would already be on the case.
Yeah.
And Dick, of course, is trying to solve the case. But also, I think Dick is giving attention to the humanity of it. And to Gordon and Gordon's humanity and what Gordon is going through. And I love that, because that speaks volumes about Dick. You know, I suppose I'm just not used to it yet. Used to what? I'm not used to you being there when I look up. That's an incredibly sweet moment.
It is. And it sort of again plays into that whole how he is different to Bruce.
Yeah.
I was going to mention, actually, before these moments, I think my favourite element of this book is, I guess, how the beginning monologue, sort of split over many panels from Dick, is sort of going back to him as a child in the circus, and there being a map of, I presume, America with red pins and blue pins, and it's like, Dad, what do these mean? And he's told, well, don't quote me, but I think the blue ones are sort of, you know, more safe shows, will have safety nets, harnesses, etc. The red ones, they're dangerous. You know, we have to put more on a show. It's like the big city centres. And he looks on the map and there's just one spot and it has a black pin. And I was like, what's that? It's like, well, that's Gotham.
Yeah.
Some places just have a hunger about them, son.
Yeah.
And it's just the idea that Gotham is this insane place of chaos. Like, it's sitting over a gate of hell or something. I love that idea.
Yeah. Very much feeds into the next arc, which is the Hungry City arc, which is also, when you buy the Black Mirror in, say, this form, which is or any collected form, that is included in this, because the 3-issue arcs obviously don't fill a trade, but they put about 6 or 9 issues into these, as well as the backup stories that were running at the time. And also, you get to see some good kind of technical hardware crime fighting from Dick, which is all this kind of stuff.
Oh, Bat Taser, forgot about that.
Yeah. And this kind of stuff, the one-wheeled motorcycle, which I really love, the sort of Bat unicycle thing. All of that is great, kind of good action writing and artistry. And basically it's all in the service of leading Dick to this bizarre, and again, it's the grotesquerie of it all, this bizarre kind of auction house where they've gassed the whole room with an hallucinatory gas, so everyone has got to wear gas masks.
Yeah.
Except they know that Dick Grayson is in there.
Even though Dick Grayson has used Mission Impossible technology to put someone else's face on his face.
And that sort of stuff goes back to that stuff that Alfred was saying about it being a performance. So he's like, you're like James Bond, and that kind of leads into that quite well. it becomes a kind of James Bond super spy thing. And this guy, I can't remember his name. It's this is a weird
Etienne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean his last name. I can't pronounce it, but it's he is just like this grotesque, hunched old man walking around on canes. Really quite horrible creations you get in this.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that on one hand, this feels like the dry run for the Court of Owls. You know, you've got this sinister elite society that have been operating in Gotham, if not the world, for a very long time, and Batman has no idea. And they're all masked. Although I guess that's where the similarities end, because then after that, you know, it's kind of revealed that they're just elites. They're just normal people who are just bidding on, I mean, just to ram home that they're evil, they're bidding on a crowbar that may or may not be the crowbar that killed Robin all those years ago. But I love that they're just normal people, just horrible rich people. And Etienne goes, like you say, Bond. He goes full Bond villain, like just giving a speech that is just needlessly mean. Like, to what end? You know, I think I'm going to paraphrase, but it's essentially saying, you know, we have to be evil is human. It's what separates us from the animals, pretty much. Yeah. Like, to be evil is the most natural thing in the world. It's just absolutely diabolical. And I love that he's just in this room with these sick, rich, evil fucks who, and then they know. You have the eyes wide shut moment of, you know, a room full of masked people saying, you don't belong here. Or I guess like Inspector when Blofeld sort of says, oh, James Bond, there you are. Like, it is a really creepy feeling when, you know, your masked hero is among people. You think, you know, you don't feel like this is the moment where they're going to face off. You feel like he's just gathering information, and it just turns like, no, we know you're not supposed to be here. Yeah. And it is nightmarish, and it becomes nightmarish because I think the gas is maybe scarecrow gas or something else gas, and everything just starts to get weird. And and we were saying earlier, it's hard to create new villains, and I think, like, I tip my cap because, like you say, it's just an old guy with he's just an old man, but it really rams home that he's just a horrible, horrible individual.
I don't know if they ever bring him back. Actually, it'd be interesting to see him come because he's quite elderly. So
so I typed into a website that sort of shows you where characters turn up. So I did that for Professor Pig as well, and saw he's only in a handful. I think he does turn up again, only in a handful of issues, but I think it's more in Nightwing related stories. I think he remains a Dick Grayson villain rather than a Batman villain.
But he's a terrific villain. I like that whole sort of culty element that's in there. And it's stuff I'd like to see kind of picked up again. I don't know how much it is picked up again later, but certainly stuff. Because this was, for me, this was the beginning of the end of my Batman kind of period. Because once it moved to the New 52, which I really didn't enjoy first time out, and have later come to kind of be more interested and respect in different ways, I was kind of done with it because it's so weird because we were talking about R.I.P. and Morrison. So my whole kind of rebirth of interest in Batman started in about 2007. So nearly 20 years ago now. Because I remember going for a coffee with a friend and he had picked up the new issue of Batman that Paul Dini was writing. Paul Dini had just come onto the book. And I was like, oh, you're buying Batman, how come? And it'd been years since I bought Batman. And he said, oh, well, Morrison is coming onto Batman. And I was like, shit, really? And he's like, yeah, Morrison's going to be writing Batman. because I was not really on the internet. I'm not really kind of hooked into what was going on in the community. I just read comics, and he said Morrison's going to be writing Batman. He's going to kill him off. Paul Dini's doing a run first of all, a couple of runs first of all, and then Morrison's going to come on. And I was like, oh, I might start picking it up. And then I began to think about it, and it's like, no, actually, do you know what? I remember how much I loved Batman in the 80s. I'm going to go back and I'm going to get everything. And I did. Everything. Every fucking... So, Batman Detective, and I picked the issue just before year one, and the issue, whatever the corresponding was thing on Detective was. Batman Detective, Legends of Dark Knight, Batman Confidential, Batman Chronicles, Shadow the Bat, Gotham Knights. Every one shot, every mini series, I brought the lot, and I think to this day, I don't think there's anything outstanding that I didn't pick up for that period. So 87 all the way up to 2007, and then onwards into, and then I stopped at 2011 because once they were like, yeah, we're ending Batman and restarting it, I was just like, nah, I'm done. And I've still got all of those comics in various forms. Like I've now started to get rid of the single issues and moving into the trades and things. But that it's interesting that these stories kind of come from the two bits that began and ended my interest in Batman, if you like. Also interesting to note is the famous Jock Batman cover, that image, Detective Comics 880, which still goes for stupid money if you buy the comic. That cover recently got sold. The original art for that cover recently got sold. Did you happen to see this? No. So it sold for $284,000, I believe. The original art. The amount of money that Jock saw from that, zero, because he had sold the original art years before. I don't know what he got for it at the time, but the insanity of it going for that amount of money, which is probably, respectfully, more money than the entire run of that issue would have made when it came out. But 284,000, I think it was something like that, but close to 300k, of which Jock sees nothing. Because I can't remember, did we talk about this a few weeks ago? We were saying that the original art is one of the reasons a lot of artists still draw.
You have
traditional. Yeah, because they can still make a really good living selling that original art. And it's a shame. There was one artist I remember talking to, and I said to him about original art, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't sell it. I keep it all." But I think since then he has now started to shift some of his original art. But $284,000 for that cover.
So where's that hanging? Just in some guy's house?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it'll be some dude has brought that, some rich dude.
I mean, I've kind of felt sheepish when I've spent like 70 quid on like a Monzo print or something, and then sort of presented it to my wife of just like casually. So where do you think this will go? This Barry Windsor Smith Weapon X panel. Where do we think we can hang this in the house? And just have this look of.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I don't own comic art, apart from the expense, is the size. So a lot of it is drawn actually quite big, and having the space for it. Look, I mean, there's pages I'd love to own, there's images I'd love to own, but at the end of the day, I think when you boil it all down, the comic is the thing. The comic is the thing. You can buy all the action figures and prints and things that you want, but ultimately, the the form is the comic. That is the final form. And if you ain't got that, you ain't got nothing, as far as I'm concerned. Because like that is it. It's meant to be a digestible form of entertainment, and to a certain degree a disposable form of entertainment. Someone was making a great argument online the other day about we should normalize kids, just
I think
we talked about this, right, just rolling them up and shoving them in their back pocket. And it's just like, yes and no. And I would be for that if they were $2 a piece. But at $5 to $6 or $10 a piece, no.
Well, on the Batman theme, and I think Matt Fraction is going to be in Batman, and the variant covers have started to sort of rear their head.
Yeah, I think I did an article on it a few weeks ago.
Okay. I don't think that Daniel Warren Johnson at time of recording has been revealed, but I'm like, oh, I like the look. I always love his art.
Yeah.
But the one that there's some great artists, there's Frank Quietly and what have you. But the one that really jumped out at me was is it David Ayer?
Oh, David Aha, I think.
Yeah, who did Aja, who did the art for Hawkeye with Matt Fraction, which is great. And I looked at that, I was like, oh, I love that. And it's like, I don't know, so you worked in the comic shop. I don't understand it. There's a ratio. It's like 1 in 50 or 1 in 500.
Yeah, so it means that your comic shop would have to order 50 of the regular cover,
right,
or 50 of the regular and the oh god, there's usually like a 1-to-1 variant, like so an A cover and a B cover. So 50 of those in order to be able to order one of the it's fucking crazy.
Well, anyway, I looked at it, I was like, oh, I'd love to have that. And it was like £35 for one comic. And I just thought I can probably buy, I don't even know if this is good, but if I really enjoy it and want to own it, I could probably have the whole run for that price.
Yeah.
I'm weighing it up. I do, but it's first world problems.
No, absolutely. And my attitude is always buy what you want, buy what makes you happy. But at the same time, I think it is an industry that needs a bit of a reality check. But, it is expensive to publish comics. So I get it from that point of view. And I think it's great that you can have these covers and have an artist be paid quite high sums of money to make those covers. Yeah. So there is that. I'm not trying to take that away from artists. But
there was one artist making that point quite recently about how much they're getting paid versus another company.
I think it was I can't remember who it was now, but
quite high profile, but
was it Dusting Nyan or someone like that?
I don't know if the posts are still up, but I thought it was illuminating, like it sort of gone nuclear with. But I mean, I guess part of the problem is speculation as well. Like I'd be buying these comics because I'm a fan of the artist and I want it for myself. I'm not looking to flip it for like double or more.
No.
But I guess there's always that speculation of, oh, let's buy this and hang on to it because it might be worth something. Like I was going through like my box of looking at stuff from 20 years ago and had a look at how much they're worth. It's practically the same price as I bought it for. So it feels completely hit or miss of what will accrue in value. But the value of that thing to me is I really enjoy this book, so I'm going to keep it.
And I'm not saying there aren't things that are in my web store that aren't of a slightly higher price, because I've gone and I've looked and I've researched the prices on that thing and seen, okay, well that's the norm for that comic. And sometimes people are willing to pay it and sometimes they're not. But I don't seek those things out. I prefer just to, there's loads of stuff. I bet if I went through all these boxes here, which is the next thing, is going to be the next big podcast, is me going through these boxes to finally trim this collection down and read it. which is the important. I pulled out the first few comics that I want to read, and I still haven't got around. But that's been done more out of a kind of I'm reaching a certain age now, and I want this to have some sort of meaning rather than just sitting there in a box. It has no real meaning sitting there in a box. It has to move on, and if I can sell that comic and that will make someone else happy, great. And I get my pleasure from it, and then maybe with the money, I go and buy the trade, or I go and buy another book that I like. Everyone's happy.
I've been paying it forward. I've not had the karma yet, but I've had a rule of myself of when I've bought an absolute edition of something, I'm just giving the older version I had, whether it be a trade or a deluxe, I'm just giving it to a local charity shop that specializes in books and just letting someone else come across that rather than trying to sell it on eBay. And just, but only for those, because I'm trying to justify my extravagant purchase.
I prefer a good hardcover or a nice floppy trade, just because of the expense wise, it's easier to buy those. Omnibuses, if there's nothing else available, I will try and save up and get them, but those are very rare. I think I own 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I own about 9 omnibuses, so it's less than 1% of my entire collection, I would say. So I don't have the room for them really. But however you want to buy comics is fine. Enjoy them. That's the main thing. I'm hoping you enjoy them. We always go off on these tangents every episode.
I just needed someone to support my decision to spend £30 on a single comic.
Yeah,
I felt like this was for it.
I think if it's right for you and you've got the money and you're not, I always think this is the thing. If you've got the money and you're not hurting anyone by doing that, do it. Buy that comic, have that donut, have that, go and have that expensive breakfast. But just enjoy it. Just enjoy it and be happy with it. I think that's the main thing for me as I get older. Anyway, we're moving on, folks. You can catch up with the Comic Crush at the Comic Crush. .bsky.social on Blue Sky, at the Comic Crush on at the Comic Crush at the Comic Crush on the Comic Crush at Comic Crush on Threads or Instagram. We are on Facebook, the Comic Crush. Do follow there on any of the socials for any of the, if you want to get the stuff first that comes out in the Comic Crush, the articles, the trailers, the stuff that's for sale in the web store. Because that's where it goes first. It goes out onto the socials. Do check out the web store because that's how I keep this going. That's the only way I can financially keep it going. There's loads of great stuff. I am in the middle of getting ready to drop about 1,000 new comics in there over the next few weeks. So do watch out for that. And once I do get that long talked about podcast, which is just about all the back issues that I own. Once I get that up, there'll be even more stuff going in there. So there's plenty of opportunities for you to own things that you've always wanted or been curious about. Also check out the Patreon, which you can join from £2, and that helps me just keep going and survive and pay my bills and pay my rent. And I'm extremely grateful for anyone that does that. And there is a bunch of stuff you can get with the Patreon. We'll be back for the next episode, which will be chosen by you, unless, of course, this is the one you've chosen near the end, and that final episode is the very last episode we're doing. Recording wise, we are getting close to the end. We go on ever closer, which is something Helen and I will be discussing in a minute. But thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Remember, you can get us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. And as always on the comiccrush.com website. Helen, got anything else you want to say to the fine folks listening?
No, but I will definitely come up with some other upcoming issues that the listeners can advise me whether to go for that variant. Yeah, go on.
The answer:
if there are a bunch of enablers, or
yeah,
if
they're enablers. I can tell you. I know some of these guys. They're enablers, right? This has been Detective Comics for the Comic Crush, and we will catch you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.